So the environment challenge required you, the submitters, or anyone who was participating, to paint a landscape according to this description. A great struggle cuts through the horizon, buried under sand and overgrowth. Great boulders form mountainous cliffs, sharp piercing the clouds, hiding the great edge of the world from view. So the horizon is distorted. That's number one. Alright, to the traveler, these great shapes look to be as any formation of the planet's face, but these rocky peaks are the scattered smaller pieces of something bigger, something older. They were the great rocky fingers, a great shoulder, or a half hand of a god, half head of a god. These were the remnants of a great battle fought between titans, a great battle that hailed no victor. Great men and beasts that had clashed at one brief moment in the past. They now scatter here, the cliffs populating the view, ever reaching and silent. So lots of shapes coming up in my mind about that sort of like silhouettes of pieces of people and pieces of beasts scattered across the horizon, scattered across the landscape, big and small. Titanous, really, really large, and we're talking large scale beings here that are made of stone or fleshy or skeleton, however you wanted to interpret the chemical, um, how they were composed, whether they were great rocky titans or they were people of flesh and blood. The sky above darkens, lit by two sister stars setting together beneath the rocky edge of the horizon. So two stars, the wash, the environment generally speaks of a sunset. The wash typically should be warm and cools, hitting nighttime, so the best of both. Really, really busy environment. And have some requirements here. Thumbnails and sketches and other planning and blueprinting should have been submitted. So many of you are already disqualified, but I'm still going to look at your work. And final environment illustration painted in a 16 by 9 or higher resolution in that ratio. So 1920 by 1080. So you just had to post it. You still have time for those who wanted to post their stuff. You still have time on Thursday to post your stuff, but today's the first day. I'm going to try to push it to the 16th if there are so many submissions, but let's get started. Some of the paintings that you guys have painted for me, so some of them look like clip art or pop-up books, and what that means is like this pop-up book. So when you have like a set vertical location for where that one piece in the foreground should be, and everything feels like so separated from each other and seamed, like you can actually see the seams between the points and the distance or the depth, the points of depth. So the foreground is here, and then this is nicely cut off, and then the background is there, and the midground, and the final background in the back. So some of your paintings look like pop-up books or clip art. Something like this, like shadow puppets. And the reason why this is dangerous is because you're not really creating the feeling of the environment as blended together, as a seamless environment. So when I say seamless environment, I'm pretty much talking about these two pieces, which are my favorite ever, 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 ever. They're beautiful. They're by Albert Bierstadt. They're called Rocky Mountains. Also Albert Bierstadt here. I don't know how to pronounce that. But what he's done is that he's managed to create that. This is a really high resolution one. He's managed to create that separation between the background and the foreground. So as you can see, as I've instructed before, the foreground is always darker with higher contrast than the background, which is washed out. But it doesn't feel seamless. It doesn't feel like clip art. It doesn't feel like this has been like lassoed out, and then we have the midground and the midtones there, and then we have the background. There's a slow descent. So if we take this into Photoshop, so let me find where that painting is on my desktop. Right here. Damn it. Okay, right here. And we observe what's happening with the values. So let's take a look at what's happening with the values here. We can see that it's not cut and paste, cut and dry, I don't know what the term is, just a complete severance between foreground, middle ground, and background. What we see is a gradual, take a look at the color picker, a gradual darkening of the values towards the foreground, in a gradual movement upward against the vest. Take a look at what's happening to the the color picker here. It goes up and down, but typically it's moving on a trend going up, and it'll eventually hit the highest, lightest tones towards the sky. So this is exactly what was supposed to happen. There shouldn't be pure areas of contrast unless we're talking about something, dark foreground against a light background, and then we have that cut separation between the two. So if your environment speaks a really good blended atmosphere where everything seems to be jutting out and blending together and connected on the same surface, part of the same environment, part of the same atmosphere, and in the same air, if it passes in the grayscale stage, then it will definitely pass when you add color. Really, the color is the easiest part for me because it's just adding color. You're just adding the environment, you're adding the color of the environment, it's just the wash. But all of that depth, all the depth principles, the scale, the raising up along the horizon line, this is typically what it should have looked like. It should have been moving like this on the thumbnail stage. If your thumbnails are too separated from each other or they look too much like clip art, they're supposed to look like clip art early on. They're supposed to look like really, really blocked in pieces, lassoed together, but on the final rendering, this is what we're going for. And I know this is like master level work, but it's a great reference point just to see how a painting can pull off such a successful atmosphere without it looking like an artificial landscape or looking too fake. And that's one of the things I'm going to address today when the environment looks too fake. So over here, he's managed to create this distinction between this part of the middle foreground, I guess you can call it, into the midground, and create this connection between them. So this wasn't as dark as this immediate foreground. It got a little bit lighter so that the transition felt a little bit more gradual. So he didn't use this deep shade for these for these trees here. He also didn't use this deep shade for this part because this rock is more distant, but all of this detail, this beautiful, amazing detail is reserved for the foreground. But also, there's this like a line of sight, and the line of sight should also have some detail sitting on the line of sight. So this god right here is working as an arrow. This tree is also working as an arrow. This entire curve here made along the cliff and along this detail is also working as an arrow. So everything is kind of pointing towards this really, really high detail. So I'm going to be looking for this grayscale transition, so a safe transition or seamlessness between all of the middle ground, foreground points of depth. I'm also going to be looking for the trend of the values and how they move along. Do they get lighter as we go back? So we're going to be constantly looking for that movement upward in the value, which happens in every successful environment drawing. If you have the foreground, middle ground, and background all have the same amount of darks, you're not going to accomplish anything within them. They're all sitting on a light background. It's just going to look like a pop-up book. So the way to make that pop-up book go away is by connecting the ground with the object, so having like this nice connecting anatomy, like a torrential anatomy, that's not the word, like an earthly anatomy, rocks, grass, any kind of foliage that connects this. It's not just perfectly gardened, it's messy, it's a romantic garden, so it's messy. And I'm going to be looking for the trend that moves back towards the background, so less visibility for the background, less contrast, less detail, less edge work, and pretty much lighter values. Okay, so before I do all of that, I'm going to be giving you a little bit of a lesson on the rules of depth, pretty much how we make something look far away. So the first way we make something look far away in an environment, in an open space, let's say we have triangle number 1 and triangle number 2. They're both beside each other. How do we make these look like they're far away? You can either point and say, hey, this is further than this. So this is at 1 meter and this is at 3 meters away. Alright, we can do that, but that's no way to paint. That's no way to express something in a painting. It should be without words or diagram. It shouldn't be a diagram. It should speak on its own. The first way is by moving the object up along the horizon line. So they're the exact same size. Alright? They just moved up along a horizon line. So you're creating depth by moving along the horizon. Number 3 is, please stay on topic. If anyone goes outside of topic or starts talking about random shit, please feel free to mute them for 2 minutes or something. Then there's the moving up along the horizon line and shrinking. So you shrink its size. Scale is another way. So plus the horizon plus the scale, moving up along the horizon and shrinking the scale. This makes something look like it's far away. Then there's the detail fade. So detail fade can mean less edges. It can mean less small brush, so all large brush. Less sharpness in the edges, less small brush. Edges can also mean, less edges can also mean less contrast. Less detail, less contrast. And it can also mean blur, that you're blurring away the object. All of these create the feeling that the object has less detail. So all of this is less detail. So the way to make detail happen is to do the opposite. Add more sharp edges. Look at the sharp edges here. Add more small brush work. Look at all the small brush work here in the background in this painting. More contrast, lots of contrast over here, lots of it. And no blur at all, very, very sharp. So number 5 would just be the atmospheric fade. And I've separated the atmospheric fade on purpose because it's like a natural phenomenon. So atmospheric fade would mean that this object, with its lack of detail, has been faded into the distance, and it makes it feel like it's in the distance, it's far away. See, these are the things you could use to apply depth into your painting, and that's the biggest trouble. Your biggest obstacle in painting an environment is creating depth. Write that back to me. So this is atmospheric fade. Fade. Okay. Gradation of detail, contrast, size, saturation. Easy way to group them all together. No, it's not, because we're trying to show which ones we can use, or instead of collecting them as a whole in one general movement backward, we're really trying to pick and choose which ones we can use, because take a look here. There's contrast over here, there's detail over here, and there's small brush work over here. So it's a pick and choose, and the reason why we can break some of these rules, it isn't always a movement back, because take a look here, this is a focal point. The focal point is in the midground, and so that's why it's become important for us to know exactly what's being used where. So atmospheric fade is being used up here. This is a definite. This is definite background, large brush, low detail, a little bit of detail up here, but it's nowhere near competing or contesting the detail here. This is the focal point. So you have to ask yourself, I'm also going to be looking for the focal point. So the safe transition between the units, I don't know what the hell word this is, the line of sight, I guess, and the focal point is really, really important. I need to see all of those. Okay, so you lose points for not having a focal point. Lots of points if you don't have a focal point or an assigned focal point, and it can only be limited to midground or foreground. If your focal point is in the background, you're really giving yourself a hard time. It's going to be a complex equation to solve, figuring out which rules you can use if everything is telling you everything fades and is less important when it hits the background. If I was a photographer and I was trying to take a picture of something really, really scenic and beautiful, and that particular part of the glacier is really beautiful, what I'm going to be doing is moving in closer towards the glacier, placing it in a place in the photograph where you can't miss it. But if you're trying to put something where you can't miss a focal point and you don't want to miss it, you're not going to place it up here in the distance where you can't see it. And if you do want to add in a dragon or something somewhere, like a silhouette of a dragon sleeping, you're going to have to fade it out. It's part of the background as much as this mountain is. You can't detail the dragon because it's suddenly the focal point. Not only is the focal point going to be detailed, but everything around the focal point. And if you remember the rule, wherever the focal point is radiating from, be it this way, this way, this way, this way, or this way, it radiates like this, 100% detail level. And then probably 70% of that is detail level. And then 50% of that is detail level. So you drop by half. If using this much, if it's this saturated in detail, if it's this much traffic, this has to be way less by comparison, almost half or less. And then we hit like 30% detail level. But take a look at what's happening here. Somehow the focal point is being shared like this, where this is a smaller focal point and this is a larger focal point, and everything seems to be radiating out of that. So this is the line of sight that I was talking about. where you have detail, almost contesting level of detail up here. But one thing, the reason why this isn't fully contesting the detail and the focal point here is because this is darkened. It doesn't have as much contrast, where this really has dark against light. It's basically an X-ray. If you look at it, it just looks like an X-ray. And then now you can see and appreciate color was just in the way the whole time. The color is pretty elementary if you think about it. It's pretty normal. It's pretty basic. Even the grayscale values used here can be, changed a little bit, can be a little bit cooler. I mean the green values, if they were just, I don't mean to critique Albert Bierstadt's work, but if it was just a little bit cooler because it was in shadow and we had more warmth here. But at the end of the day, the colors are really obsolete. They do nothing for the painting. And if you're depending on the color, at that point, you really are focusing all your energy on the wrong thing. Okay, so tilt shifting. What is that? What do you mean? The biggest issues are creating depth. Yeah, that's the biggest issue you're ever going to face. And that's the biggest issue I faced the first time I tried to do a landscape. I felt like I was not, it didn't feel like a landscape. It felt like a piece in front of another piece. It felt like clip art or a pop-up book. So let's take a look at this other one, exactly the same. We find the line of sight, and this is the radiation point of the focal point. It's all right here. The radiation point starts here, somewhere around this tree, and this whole reflection point, just the highest contrast, and it moves around in a sphere. So it's just one beautiful little curve that moves around like that. It's not so much the rule of thirds or the golden ratio, but it has a nice little ring to it. And out here, do you see the detail level? The detail level is almost half. So this detail radiation, it gets less and less detailed as we move out of the canvas as much as we move in the canvas. So the detail fades as much as we move to the edges of the canvas as we move into the canvas. So out here is as little detailed. See this? And this is as little detailed as out here. Because here and here and here, no one puts a focal point here. So there's never going to be a point where we have a focal point here and here. If you have a focal point just sitting right there, you've done a big mistake. You can have a focal point around a corner, but you cannot have a focal point just on the corner where half of it is showing. It's wrong to do that. The framing requires zero detail on it, or less detail altogether. This is beautiful framing here as well. The composition is just so laid out in such a way where everything is pointing to this little valley where everything is happening. I don't know why I'm using purple and pink. I mean blue and pink. Alright? Alright. So let's jump into these and see where all of these rules have been used, where they've been broken. Let me keep my notes by me so that I can refer to them. And I don't know how I'm going to do this. So let's refer to this. Let's see who's used this and who hasn't. Let's start with this one. I think this is Titan's Graveyard. So you haven't used the supposed landscape. You're supposed to use that. You do have some pieces of I'm not sure if I can tell where they are. I'm not sure this was entirely dedicated to this challenge. You just wrote it in a parentheses that you were part of the challenge, but I don't think this started off as part of the challenge. I think it's well framed. I really like the roof of the cave, how it's compressed the symmetry and how it's compressed the composition. I really like the symmetry. I like how you've centered the detail, so you have used one of these rules. Where is it? You have used one of these rules. I think I just closed one of them, but you've used the contrast, which creates that detail feeling. I hate you, Photoshop. Yeah, so right here the character is definitely visible, but as for everything else, it's kind of a little bit off. You might want to work on it just a little bit more. You have Thursday and the next Tuesday to work on this. So this piece here, I remember seeing the thumbnails for this, so this passes. It's definitely 16 by 9. It's a nice long cinematic wide canvas, which is the best for landscapes, basically because our eyes are beside each other instead of on top of each other. So we see things in a horizontal way when we tilt our head. Our head moves easily towards the sides and nods, or shakes instead of nods. But yes, you've used a really nice blue, but this blue right now that you've used has been assigned for this deep dark part under the cave. But everything else out here seems to be sharing the same blue. You are getting a little warmer out here because of the greens, and I see just a little bit of beige. But I recommend that you get fully warm because it was a sunset. So the way to get warm right off the blue, so we choose our wash. What's the next warmest color beside blue? The next warm, the soonest color of warmth beside that blue. I'm just going to wait for the answer while I lasso. So, I don't know if any of you know, but I injured my mouth really badly over the weekend, or before the weekend. And I had to cancel all my classes because I couldn't talk. Yeah, I'm just trying to share a story while everyone answers the question. Purple? No. Yellow? No. The nearest color to blue that is the most warm. Green, yes. Green. No, it's not purple. Purple is colder. No, absolutely not. No, you all had it wrong. The nearest color to blue that is the most warm. So remember, in order to connect colors together, you don't just jump from blue to red or to get warm. You don't just jump from blue to yellow. You have to go through the doors. You have to go through the neighbors' doors. Imagine everyone lives in a railroad apartment. And all of these are railroad apartments, and they're connected by one route. The nearest color to all of this, to this wash you have here, is turquoise, or this blue-green, this green. So that's where you go to get that warmth, that initial warmth to just pop. So I'm going to get a new layer. I'm going to get soft brush, and I'm just going to warm this whole place up. To choose a better value than this one that's a little bit more turquoise, a little bit more white. And I'm just going to throw that right in there. Get another value. Okay. And this is the exact color I'm just going to throw because I have to differentiate between what's warm and what's not, and a landscape that is both in the cools and in the warms. And we are in a valley, so we're going to be in the valley aspect, like we're going to be in the cool part of the environment with very little of the sun coming through. But we have to create that differentiation between these two planes. So I'm going to lower that opacity. I just need to make sure that this is all going toward the warm. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to erase away, getting cooler near the bottom because it's getting deeper into the valley. So it's purple again near the base, and then just at the top, deselect, just at the top so we get that warmth coming in. So duplicate. And then as that warm gets warmer, we can now move. So now that we've set the stage for that, we can get a little bit lighter and more green. We can start bringing in those yellows and get lighter and lighter along. I'm going to erase some of this to make it cooler so it transitions this way. I'm also going to make this entire upper part here darker because we're still in the valley. So I'm going to use a multiply, really low opacity, and I'm just going to toss that cool color all around the base. And this is exactly what kind of thinking that we want to encourage. This is exactly what we want to do. We want to be able to differentiate between values and colors at the same time. That and the fact that we're not seeing much of the remnants or like pieces of body parts. I think those are the only areas where we're having major, where we're missing a lot of the assignment. But color, and I'm going to grab some of this cool or this warmer shade, and I'm going to run it across this side of the rock because this side of the rock is getting the illumination. So this is one way to dress up the environment without it being monochromatic, because you had a monochromatic environment. Okay, so we started with that. I think the best thing to do, so before was a little overly purple, and then after we've separated the purple, we might need a little bit more purple just on the bottoms or up here, but more warmth than purple. This felt like a foggy day instead of a sunset scene, where this is encouraging that there is some sunlight outside. Mixing that yellow is mixing with the blue of the wash, causing that green to happen. So we don't go straight for yellow. We transition like a railroad apartment between them. So this silhouette that's happening here has to be explained. It should be explained either by like a peak in the values or something, because what's happening is you're actually showing me where the suns are. The suns are right here. And it's too stylistic, in fact, to avoid adding that peak in the value for where the suns are bright. It's too stylistic a choice. We have to think about the physics first. So this is where all that sunlight is coming from. And you have to include those. You have to make sure that those are circular and a little bit more circular and a little bit more bright. So I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna make them a little bit more filter, blur, glowy. Alright, so if the sun is coming in from this direction, then suddenly we have a different kind of environment. So the fact that you laid the suns here, all of this light is just going to come straight in through here. And we have some amazing opportunities for cast shadows. Just along here, just along these sides. But really it feels like it's that clip art environment. It feels like a clip art environment because of how cut everything is from each other. This is the background, this is the middle ground, and this is the foreground. A lot of this space here is, a lot of the space of the painting is being taken up by the foreground and the middle ground. So you have to focus all the detail here. If this is where we're getting the most of the contrast and it's near the background, then this is a mistake. Because over here, yeah, we have the sunlight shining in and illuminating this entire valley. But the sun isn't visible. If the sun was visible, it would take all the attention away. So one of the worst things you can do is throw off the focal point. So you can either get rid of the focal point completely or keep it, but get rid of it completely and make this distant area the focal point, or keep it and throw the sun somewhere else or make them smaller. When you do that, it's a lot easier to refocus the attention back. So you've got this character here. What you can do is cheat just a little bit, so you have already so much happening along the character that you can introduce a secondary light source to make him a little bit more visible. It's just a small secondary light source just to make him a little bit more visible, and this will allow you to refocus the detail and the attention. So now that he's a little bit more visible, this whole area can be redarkened and he can be the focal point, and the focal point can move along a nice curve towards one corner, towards the other. And using this exact color palette, we can add in other parts here of whatever is remnant, whatever the specificity of the objects in the foreground. So that way more happens. The canvas right now is severed into two halves, the top corner and this side here. And this has to be changed. Something has to come in and interrupt all of that and relocate the focal point. But these are the biggest issues of this painting. A focal point issue, especially because the sunlight was in the background. A lighting issue, and some of the colors, it was a little bit monochromatic. It needed a little bit more natural shading. This is a natural setting. Okay? Some stuff in the foreground, if you're confused as to what to add, go back to the narrative. The narrative helps you dress up a canvas. Write that back to me. A narrative helps you dress up the canvas. Okay, so waiting for Photoshop to do its shit. Thank you. Alright, so this is one of the examples of when we have that clip art feeling in the painting, where there isn't enough happening, there isn't enough anatomy for the environment or foliage anatomy here connecting these pieces together. So it feels like everything is just copy pasted MS Paint or something, or copy pasted photographs from different magazines. We also don't have any darkness on the foreground of this piece, and we have a pretty blue midday sky and almost no saturation everywhere else. A blue sky that's blue means the sunlight is at its highest. It's when the sunlight is really, really bright, and when we're having that sunset color, the sunlight should be somewhere around here. And if the suns have set past the horizon line, then we're going to have an almost dark orange sky. It's never either or. You have to either have a blue sky and the sun is pretty high. Even if it's halfway across, it should still be pretty high. And if it's sunset, if the suns are not visible, which they should be just around this area here, then it should be more orange, more dark. These feel like stars instead of suns. I call them sister stars, but they're suns. They were the suns of the universe, of this planet. They weren't just stars. But it's an interpretation, I guess. So what to do to fix this? I think the color should be, so it's hard to decide exactly how to rearrange it without kind of ruining what you've done. So let's start with the environment. Let's start with the major core shadows and reflections. So this core shadow here, this core shadow here. Oops. These core shadows. This one here. These all need to be darkened. So it's going to be really hard for me to darken this without having to grayscale the whole thing. So, darken. I should probably just grayscale it. And then kind of just go over everything with a new color. Deselect, color, grayscale. Okay. So now that we've cast these cast shadows, I'm just going to erase away some of this stuff. You can start talking about what the light is doing on objects that are reflective versus objects that aren't. So this entire river area going down should get that reflection from the sun. So if it is a river, if it is water, water has a higher specular potential than anything else, and we have that entire route of light traveling through the valley. But the way you've kind of receded everything, it kind of when we're in bird's eye view, the horizon line goes up. It doesn't go down. We see more of the ground than we do of the sky. But right now you're at kind of like a mid-tone where it feels like a mid-place where it feels like we should be looking at it through his perspective. So the canvas should be just a little bit lower with the hand just a little bit higher up. So this is so difficult for me. I wish I asked for PSDs. Okay, so if the hand is higher up along the painting, so flatten. You'll see what happens to the horizon when the hand is a little bit higher up. Oops. Kind of feels like it's closer. It's as dark as it should be. The horizon line feels like it can be a little bit smaller or a little bit lower. And we can start adding more shapes here in the background to hide the horizon away and that rocky kind of distortion that it was in. So if we made the hand just a little bit smaller, where's that darken? Just throw that in the background. I'm sorry, I'm just completely painting over your stuff. Need to keep that shadow on that light on the water, but okay. And then finally, reorganizing the foreground, making sure that the foreground is as dark as it's supposed to be. So the same contrast levels over here. Starting to feel a little bit better. And then because you've set the sun, we need to make the background darker all around. So generally darker background And this is pretty much thumbnailing, so this wasn't detailed enough for you to transfer it into color yet. You transferred into color too soon. And what we need to see is more detail focus. So now that we've taken care of what's in the foreground, the sizes and scaling, and what's in the background and what's getting smaller, we need to refocus our attention back towards that detail curve, so the line of sight. So this, you've chosen this character to be the most detailed, so we need to start throwing some contrast on him. So the light hit him, and then what's next? What gets detailed next? So this thumb is kind of in the way, and it's kind of not really helping because all of these fingers are pointing to a direction. They act as arrows. Straight lines act as arrows in an environment. Write that back to me. This acts as an arrow. So if we can follow this curve, this entire curve area, detailing the cloud and then going back down, detailing this rock, detailing him, and then coming back around to that final spiral, like a vanishing point in the spiral, then this whole area here should have been detailed. These rocks, not these, not this rock right here. Alright? But this hand here, you could have chosen a different gesture, just a slightly different gesture, or slightly tilted. The hand could have been tilted just a little bit, just so that the fingers aren't pointing away from the gesture line, or the gesture movement of that gesture line of the detail, that everything sits on that line of sight. Okay? So before, the colors were a little bit off, and the best thing to do after you want to decide some colors is decide what time of day is it. Is it nighttime or is it daytime? Daytime has those really saturated, warm colors. Sunset has those deep saturated, deep dark, warm colors, and the nighttime or anything close to sunset has those purples. So you can start with this color and then detail out of it. So anything that is in shadow gets this color, and then anything that is in the sunlight. So outside here on the outskirts, it's more purple than it is down here, which gets more of that yellow. So the closest thing to purple that is warm is the green, so we start with that next. And then after that, we get a little bit more green, and then we go towards the yellows, and then we move down towards those. This yellow isn't going to read on the thingy-majiggy, but it's still working. See this nice transition. This might not be noticeable. It might look like yellow on purple, but there is a green here. There is a blue in here as well. And this is how you make these colors match. By going through all of them as if they all have a door through each other. You can't skip. You have to go through each one as they come. And in every point of relief, in every point where there is a shadow, that's where we get the purple. And every point where there is some light, that's where we get some of that yellow. So now it's looking like a nighttime scene with the sunset and 2 stars in the sky. And this whole area here, I feel like you're missing a bunch of the geometric anatomy here. We need to see some like shadows. This whole part isn't just going to be illuminated. So that's that list, that depth list really is like your bread and butter. You have to make sure you remember that. So you see how over here, this edge is where the light ends. This is where your purple starts. So you carry that color all the way through toward, and that's where that light stops. Right here along the finger, wherever we have the edge of the finger, so every finger really is just a big rectangle. That's where we have the oranges or the yellows. Oops. It's just along the sides, just like that. So objects in the foreground are larger than objects in the background. Right? Objects in the foreground are larger than objects in the background. It isn't just the background is smaller, the objects in the foreground are larger, which is one thing that made this pop. And out of this, of course, you can detail more. I did take away a lot from it, but now it feels like a more of a unified landscape. Whereas before, it didn't feel very focused. You had daytime greens, but you had a sunset. That's impossible. You can't have daytime greens in a sunset. If you wanted to throw green here, you'd have to make sure that green is going through the blue filter. So green plus the purple, basically you have to apply it in an equation. Green comes first. Green is made up of yellow and blue, right? My brain is out of it. What does purple counter in both of those things? It counters the yellow, so the yellow gets out of the equation. What's left that blue, that purple allows? It's the blue. So you have to get like a blue-green version for the grass. You don't just go to green. You go to green through blue-green, and that's where you stop, because any yellow, the purple isn't allowing it of the environment. So that's what we throw over here. You want grass, this is how you get grass. Of course not in this vibrancy, this is retarded vibrancy, but yeah, vibrancy. But we're just bringing it down just a little bit, and we're bringing that opacity down all the way. A little bit of green at the tops. Anywhere where the sunlight does touch, though, that can be green, because sunlight is different. Sunlight is giving fuel to the colors. It's allowing the colors to be fueled. So here's a little bit of green, and then the sunlight color itself, the final sunset, look what's left of the sun over the horizon. The sun should be visible just over here, by the way. That yellow is also on the water. We just need to desaturate all of that. And that's as much as you're allowed in a nighttime scene like this. Anything that is daytime needs to have a higher sun. The foreground would be very, very lit up, and it would need to be a little bit more unified saturation wise. So the rocks here are really desaturated. This rock here felt desaturated. The long shadows we're speaking, a sunset scene. And if you want even more saturation, you can go stylistic with the saturation. So you can go crazy. Well, it's going to saturate the green, but I'll bring in the dodge tool to do the rest. To bring in that sunlight color. Make it look more sunset-ish, I guess. And bring in a bigger orange, a greater orange color. So let's go to the orange. This is going to look off. Color, orange. So we start with the color of the environment first, and then we move into everything else. So purple and orange for the background, and then all of these colors here, instead of being that pale yellow, turn into orange. And all of this over here turns orange. And anywhere on this rock where we have any kind of light, I'm just going to force it. This wouldn't have any light on it, but I'm going to force it. Just going to use a lasso. But have some of that orange on it. Just like that. Just at the very tops wherever it's visible. So we start with the environment color, and then we move down from that. We can't just throw whatever colors beside each other, so a crayon green and a crayon blue. We have to advance our color vocabulary to reflect the atmosphere. So your atmosphere is limited. So this is if it was nighttime and the sun just hit below the horizon line, or if the sun is still above the horizon line. Okay, so your color vocabulary needs to reflect your environment. Write that back to me, please. I'm just gonna do that. Now you have this beautiful clash between the purples and the yellows. You have this real sunset below or above the horizon. It doesn't matter. As long as it's working along the atmosphere, as long as it's reflecting its color wash, and it's working along the atmosphere. The very tops of the fingers I'm just going to illuminate. And just like that. I'm going to create that the terminator line with the burn tool on shadows. And I'm going to create that terminator line right along here. On these long shadows, I'm just going to exaggerate them just a little bit more. This is the focal point, but that thumb is in the way. You could have broken off the thumb, but still it looks good. And these distant shapes here, these shapes that you have, feel so unnatural. They don't feel like they belong to the environment. So you've got these really flat, eroded rocks at the very top, but then you've got these really jagged rocks that never eroded. So I think you should give them a little bit more wear and tear. Just along, wherever the rocky peaks I described were going. It's just a little bit rounder at the tops, basically. That tip at the very top didn't really feel right. Something more to this color in the distance. That's just a little bit more purple. Oop. Just a little bit more purple. And that would look really, really nice. It's just as dark as it needs to be. It's in a state of silhouette. And it matches the pattern of the light, like the pattern of the environment. So don't just throw jaggedy rocks wherever you want them to be. You have to make sure they match. What's the source of those jagged? They don't look like bone, they look like rock. And I don't know what I just did. Oh, I lost the, damn it, I lost the orange that I added. It's okay, it turned into nighttime. Above or below the horizon is optional. Your color vocabulary must reflect the environment. Yes, exactly. So let's move on to the next one. Alright, so keeping all this in mind. So let's take a look at this. The color vocabulary here. Let's start with that first, then we'll talk about scale and size and detail. So clearly this character is looking and wherever the character looks, that's your line of sight. If there's a character in your environment looking at something, that's your line of sight. So if this character is looking this way, oh, where's he looking? I'm going to look there. That's where you're going to go. Imagine your viewer is just a doofus, alright? He's going to look wherever your character would. So write that back to me. So because the line of sight is moving here, I know for sure this has to be the most detailed area. I've already told the viewer where they can look. Everything outside needs to be less detailed. And you have kind of created like a traffic here, or more dense, lower brush size, kind of around this area, but it's still too rough. The painting feels generally unfinished for sure. So let's talk about the colors at this point, because I can't really paint it for you. It would take too much work just to paint everything in. So all I can do is correct colors from this vantage point. So I'm going to get into the color modes. And everything that the sky rules over, I guess, I'm going to give it some warmth. So where's that red color? That nice red. I'm going to throw it there. And I'm going to erase away only where I need. Just going to try to make the sky follow the same light environment, so everything in the sky is a little warm except for the edges. And the edges, what's the opposite? When yellow leaves the room, what dominates? Purple. Because yellow brings all the brightness in it. It's one of the primaries. Yellow and blue. Was I right about green? I don't remember. I'm sorry, I'm totally out of it today. But purple dominates the environment. So you do have a purple in here, but it's not purple enough. It's too red. If I go to its source, it's almost always red. And I want to push it down toward the purple. So I'm going to do that. And I'm going to make everything purple that isn't touched by the light source. Alright, this includes shadows. This includes cast shadows. So this cast shadow here. This cast shadow here. Just go ahead and... Oh no, I still have the A. I can do it. I can fix it. Okay. So, color. Alright. I'm going to erase away wherever the light does touch. I'm going to erase away the purple. So over here there should have been a cast shadow here. The sides of this mountain. The sides of this skull right here. Over here. All these areas are being touched by a warmth. So I'm going to cast a shadow off this object. Cast the shadow here. Oops. Okay. So let's illuminate these areas. I'm going to get a mid-tone. I'm just trying to create a set area where the shadows are. I'm just going to blend that. Nope, my bad. I illuminated the side of this rock. Okay. And then anywhere where this illumination happens, that's where I'm going to throw that big belt of light. So blank, blank. Yeah, it's ugly, but just take a look at the reed. Look at that reed, man. Holy shit, that reads. all I have to do is just make sure I adjust it to the right color and the right temperature, the right amount of exposure. Just take a look at what separating the points of the environment are, like just where the shadows are and where the lights are, and creating two clashing or one general color wash, what it does to the colors. Your colors interrupted the entire image. Your colors got in the way of what's really happening here. So cast shadow, light source, line of sight, not enough detail, so that's the biggest issue. And it was a pretty closed off like environment. Like it would be really cool if you had something like something like that. Well, this was in your references. So use of references is definitely one point of, one place of issues we have in these. You guys don't follow the rules. You don't follow the the assignment requirements, which is really bad. But something like this, just to break off that horizon and put something interesting up here. Maybe some pieces over here. That are pitch black, that are in the foreground, just in your thumbnail stage. So I don't think your thumbnail stage had enough going on in it. I thought those were so boring. Something else, something like a rocky thing to warn people not to come in. Something like that, I don't know. Maybe like this is the walkway. And then everything getting brighter just along this area here. So where the highlight of the water is corresponds with where the sunlight is. In a straight line. So dress up the canvas with a little, the way to dress up a canvas is by the narrative. So if the narrative and the references are telling you there was a big arc that the writer was describing or something, or the references told you to use, or your art director told you to use, then you have to use it. But apart from these here, I think just by separating the warms from the cools, just that much, really gave the read here a lot more. It boosted that read. So whatever color you end up using for it, as long as you're separating the fact that the warms here are a lot, or the illuminated areas, and the cools are just completely almost monochromatic. Your light source, because it's a setting sun, has to hit no man's land. So you need to, no man's land, you can use no man's land values on a light source. Write that back to me. Damn it. Dodge tool. Fiend. And that's what's happening here. And this color of the light source, so the light source gives off both its color and its intensity. So that's a fundamental rule. So that means I have to bring some of this light source's color right here over the water, almost reflecting the exact orange, the exact color of the orange right along the water. Well, here is a lot less though. Okay. So a lot of stuff to cover. I think anything that isn't water in this area should be darker. The water is just like a mirror. But it's the same rules if you've noticed. It's the same exact rule. So the water has more of a color reflection capacity than the rock, so the rock needs to be just generally darker then. Oops. Just darker by a little bit, just so that we can differentiate where that water happens in between. Okay. So any questions? You can use no man's land color on a light source. No, you can use no man's land value. The values is what I'm talking about. And over here in the distance, you have a real opportunity for some atmospheric fade, man. You have to give some shapes. You have to have something happening over here. The rocky peaks are distorting the horizon. So what does that mean? That means that we're going to be having like something over here, something in the way of the horizon. We don't see a perfectly flat horizon. Just something in the distance to signify these jutting rocks ever reaching, as I wrote cheesily. Okay. Let's deselect, erase. I'm using very, very basic shapes and the landscape is speaking. The landscape has a volume to it now. And this little valley here, really, really cool if you did that. And created that fog or that atmospheric fog or something just to continue the landscape. And typically the sky should be lighter than the foreground. If the sky is darker than the foreground, at that point you've really confused what's happening in the foreground. Don't allow the sky to be darker than the foreground unless it's daytime, unless it's nighttime. Write that back to me. I'm just gonna do one big one of these. I know, it's okay, I'll fix it. Art erase. I'm gonna try to find a layer mode that matches this better. I'm probably gonna have to cool it as well. Nah, color dodge is always so intense. Damn you, layer modes, you fail me! Soft light. Maybe, yeah, soft light. Duplicate. It needs to be cooler because it's on the edges of the canvas. It needs to be way lighter, way less saturated. Just to allow that sun to do its work. And if you have more rocky peaks just around the edges over here, what will happen is we get like this cool opportunity to, right, so atmospheric fade that, and then you'll have like this cool chance to show the side of the mountain as being orange or being lit. So instead of everything always in a silhouette, you'll get to add some stuff. Oops. Just like that, and keep dressing up the environment. So these different stages, so background check, color wash check, shadows check, line of sight detail, working on it, I guess. And the background was the background color, the background, like the color of the sky. The final color of the sky was just too dark, and we just lit that up and we added some more. Okay. Steven, values that are higher than 10% gray and values lower than 90% gray and oversaturated colors. Those are no man's land, yeah. So these are no man's land right here. So this is just way too bright to use on anything, any object that isn't a light source. And this is way too dark to use on any object that isn't a pure black hole of death. And over here, these are just ridiculous. Never use these colors. Unless you're deliberately trying to create a flame or a light source color, if the light source has a color, or a neon light source or something like that, or the color of a light in a car that's blue, you know. Other than that, I think overall it was too saturated because I saturated on the same levels. I think overall it was too saturated for a graveyard. But it's really your choice, and anywhere you move it now, it's kind of still gonna work. It kind of feels like a evil river Styx valley, and this feels a little bit more romantic, which is kind of cute. I really like this one. Where you had it before was also cool. Definitely not. This over here feels more like a nighttime scene, but also like alien planet. It's not being a sun, but some sort of spell in the sky, which is also really, really cool. But take a look at what happens when we separate the shadow colors from the light source color. They both come from a different environment. There's the environment of the room, and there's the color of the light source, and this all goes back to light environment. The three components of a light environment are, I'm going to move it over here. The three components of a light environment, do you guys know what they are? Can anyone list them to me? So before, after. You have the potential to make amazing landscapes if you guys could just focus your techniques and focus all your fundamentals. So if we go back to this, making sure that the background, you're using to your full potential all of these rules of depth, that you're refocusing the line of sight and making sure the detail and the focal point are together. You're creating a seamless connection with the objects and its floor. All of these are the techniques that you can use to make sure that your environment feels safe. The radiation of detail from the focal point, starting at the focal point and going out. If your line of sight is on sharing the focal point, then you can detail this just ever so slightly, but of course it's not at 100, but it's also not at 30. Over here it's somewhat 70. The 70 goes all the way over here. And then color is just that last little piece of shit that you add on top. It has nothing to do with anything. People are so concerned with color. As you saw here, every single one of these critiques, I've grayscaled it. And the color was like the last little touch of anything. So let me take a look at, I think this one is your, is the final version of this. And this becomes very easy if we think about it, isn't it? When we start to, this feels like it's a pond. It doesn't feel like a lake, it feels like a pond, which is why I'm having trouble kind of connecting the background to this. It feels like a pond, but the pond should have a little bit more distance before we hit the horizon. Also, the reflection would be a little later. The reason why it feels like a pond is because this reflection is perfectly aligned with this. If this was further away, the reflection would be closer to the rock, and it would be more distant to us, and it would be more faded. So to make it look less like a pond and more like a lake or a larger body of water, we have to just remove this reflection from being so near to us and throw it off in the distance. Then, of course, we realize that the foreground here is way too detailed and way too exposed. We have to separate the foreground from the background. I don't know how much longer I'm going to last before I lose my voice completely, but we'll see. Oops. I'm going to try to do this well. Select inverse. Okay. So new layer. I'm going to choose a color for the shadow of the back, for the foreground. I'm going to choose that blue that you have. It's really nice, purpley blue. And I'm just going to throw that over on a new layer. Over anything in the back, in the foreground, really. You have too much detail in an area that there isn't enough light to shine on. The sun is setting. This whole area here is in darkness. So over here, what we could have is some minor rocks coming through the water, creating some pretty ripples. Probably like a finger, or like a nose, or like the face, or like a face. Yeah, a face would be cool. So like some sort of a face coming through here. That's in the midground. So the foreground could be darker, but the problem is, don't let the foreground take up too much space in the canvas, or else you're just going to have a silhouette. You're just going to have like a silhouette photo. I'm sorry, Vince. So yeah, please write that back to me. Never let your foreground take up too much space in your canvas. The foreground is supposed to be dark, and it's supposed to be without contrast. It's supposed to be like the immediate foreground. So this is not talking about midground foreground. I'm talking about immediate foreground, which is this right here. This is immediate foreground. It gets blurred. So immediate foreground, anything immediately in the foreground should be darker. Just like we see here. Should be generally darker than this. This is a nice grayscale value. All the best colors sit here. Look at that. All the best colors sit over here. But here, it's in those dark, murky areas. So this is why I'm so weirded out by him using this overly saturated green. I feel like that green should have been a little less saturated, but who am I to say? But yeah. Alright, so these are all the ugliest colors sit down here. You know, it's just like what the fuck? Like, where is the color? The only thing that's vibrant in this darkness level is blue. Everything else looks like shit. Literally looks like shit. So over here is where all the best values are. So we reserve these values for the focal point, and this is the focal point. And that's what he didn't do, but again, who am I to say? All the best of saturation should have been over here. Let's experiment with that a little bit. Let's desaturate this painting. I think it's the photograph that overdid it. I'm sure he didn't do that. I'm going to desaturate the foreground to be a little bit less crazy. And I'm going to saturate that exact area here. I'm just going to saturate this. Wait, did it resaturate? No. Sponge tool. Yeah, it resaturated. That's so weird. Desaturate, thank you. The foreground. So it does still look like trees and shit, but it's not so. And then saturate. So saturate the green here. This is supposed to be that green. That blue over here can be saturated, and we can bring all that back. And that feels more like a, like it's focused. Maybe this is too saturated now. Just a little bit. Stupid 85%. All the way up to this cloud area, which is saturated. Maybe a little bit of the greens here. And then a little bit here. And then it gets less and less saturated the more in the foreground we move. Anyway, what the fuck am I doing? So back to this one. So that's all I recommend for you, is just to put something in the foreground here with the midtones. With midtones that are kind of neighborly and have a nice edge work between them and low detail. A high detail, small brush, and the low detail is in the foreground. Okay, so not all of these I can paint over. So here, really, really nice colors. It is a nighttime scene. The sky is almost as dark as the foreground, but not nearly enough. This is midground, but it's using foreground values, so I'm just going to lighten that as best as I can. I think it was the photograph that desaturated, or oversaturated or messed up that painting, but I don't know. Okay, and then I'm going to darken the foreground. Throw some atmospheric fade just a little bit on this here. And then darken this. This seems to have atmospheric fade on it where it doesn't belong. Oops. Okay, so select inverse. Okay, so this whole area here needs to be darkened. I'm going to put on multiply. Just grab one of these and just darken this. This is part of the foreground. It's closer to us than this anyway. And then of course now we need that wash. So color. Stop. Damn it! Oh my god. I hope you guys didn't hear that. Okay, so that purpley color. Anything in the foreground. So the environment, we're separating the lights and light environments. I didn't know if anyone answered that light environment question. Yeah, and then this here, because it's less in the foreground, it gets a little bit less purple. And this gets a little bit less purple, but we're fighting purple against yellow, which is, one of them has to rule. And I think I'm going to go ahead and let purple rule. And I'm going to let the purest orange you use. See how orange it was? I'm going to just let you, I'm going to keep it, I'm hungry. I'm going to keep it to the sun. It's weird because you have the sun, but you have like these points of shadow around the suns. And then you have like the patches of light. This is not right. The suns need to be bright. They need to be brightened. So flatten the image, then brighten them. And then before I flattened it, I'm going to do that. And I'm just going to erase away. Actually, what am I doing? Oh yeah, I'm going to just paint away this horizon here. Who wants to buy me dinner? And I'm going to add that sun up here. So we've thrown it off into the distance, and the warmth just sits there, but it gets more and more purple the closer to the foreground it gets, so it transitions towards purple. So we're separating the light environment of the room, which is the nighttime, with the light source, which has a color of warmth. And separating the foreground from the background, and making sure that what's in the foreground gets darkened as is needed. Let's flatten the image. To turn off protect tones real quick. And then just carry that light all the way through. And that warmth as well. So now that we've established what's dark and these rib-like elephant graveyard from from Lion King kind of thing, now we can throw in where the light is coming through. Yes, it's a date. Okay, so now I'm going to do a quick check of the background. It just seems like the sky is too dark, for the fact that it's still sunlight out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to separate these. See, it's Lasso is even selecting them together because it blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to get the tree pattern. Making the noise helps, alright? Keep yourself entertained. This is a long process. Bloop. Just a little something like that. And now I'm going to go back to the old colors because I need some of the warmth, so I'm going to erase away only where I need to. Alright, I'm just losing my mind. Alright, so you see it was way too orange, buddy. And this here, this green isn't possible in this amount of shadow. Green needs sunlight. Please write that back to me. If you're painting grass in a nighttime scene or a scene without enough sunlight, it's not going to be green, it's going to be blue. That grass is not going to do what you want it to do. Alright? So it was just a little too green. Green needs sunlight, exactly. And then because it's such an intense sunlight, I really would just feel like it would be remiss not to just add this beautiful kind of glow, this halo off the sun just coming off, and then it's casting that wonderful cast shadow across. And making sure that all shadows get that purple to them because they're not being touched by the light source. And only areas that are being touched by the light source get that illumination. But the canvas is empty. The canvas is empty. We're seeing the horizon. We're not supposed to be seeing the horizon. So again, we need to see some rocky peaks taking, throwing the scale off and giving us some of those really, really beautiful silhouettes. Damn. So let me start with what's most distant and then go to... Fuck. Okay. Let's start with most distant and then second most and then third most. And maybe throw that into one of these. Something like that. Okay. No, this is most distant. This is just throwing that into cast shadow like that. Just eyeballing. My eye is always on this little thingy. And now that we've done that, the cast shadows have suddenly been interrupted. And we don't get to have that much illumination coming through this valley. And of course, you can throw some shadows here. And where the side of the mountain isn't getting any light source on it. And those shadows have to be purple-esque. And then this here gets some light. So we're trying to interrupt, trying to dress the canvas up. The canvas felt empty. And this is just one aspect. You shouldn't expect this rib cage here to carry the canvas for you. And you've thrown way too much detail on this skull here. I recommend you bring that skull all the way over here. The skull is so well done. But I didn't even notice it because it wasn't in the line of sight. If you want people to notice your detail, you have to you have to throw the detail in the line of sight. Oh, whoops, didn't turn these on, but I don't like them. Merge layers. So over here, this is nice. It'll interrupt that awkward, really large belt of light just coming through. And kind of just get rid of this guy here. And these guys. I feel like I want to throw them into, just more of a purple, and then have that little bit of light come through this way. But you're going to have to dress up your canvas just a little bit more with more bones, more grass, more something to illustrate the exact what the narrative was directing. More rocks, less like an English landscape and more like a Titan's graveyard where big Titans once fought a long time ago and they destroyed each other, and earthquakes ruined the face of the planet and probably caused some major tectonic shifts and created some islands along the sides, and you have to think like that. Okay, so the line of sight is right here, this beautiful curve, and that's where I threw that skull. So before, after, just too orange, not enough atmosphere. You confuse the background and middle ground. Middle ground got the darkness and the foreground got the light. That's the exact opposite of that. We focus the light environment, giving the light environment a color. So the light environment, the parts of a light environment are as follows. You've got the room. You've got the room that has a value and a color. So you have to think about what it is. Is it inside? Is it outdoor? Then you've got the light source, and then you've got the object. Let's pretend it's a chair, and the light source is a lamp. You've got these three objects in the light environment. The light source changes everything. It's the god of the image. So basically, number one, decide where your light source is. What time of day is it? What's happening? Everything. Everything is included in the light environment. The color of the light environment, the type of light. And then you've got the object. The object, is it reflective? Is it a mat? Is it made of fabric? Is it human skin? Is it a person? Is it silk? Is it a curtain? If it's a bunch of stuff, you're going to have to respond to them differently according to what their specular levels are capable of in that light environment. If the room is a bunch of blue wallpaper, really vibrant blue wallpaper, it's going to change the way the light behaves. It's going to throw its color over everything. And if it's outdoor, of course, the sunlight, everything is part of it. The sun, if it's an outdoor scene, the sun is part of the environment. It's the same thing. The color of the sky and the color of the sun are all working together. So that's what you paint first. That's the first color that goes down, but not before you establish all the rules of depth as I've listed them here. You have to establish this, and this all happens on the grayscale. This happens in grayscale. Alright? Colors come later. So establish your form before the colors in grayscale, and then work on the colors. Write that back to me. So grayscale and form first. Get the depth in. Get rid of that clip art, what's it called? Pop-up book feel. Get rid of it. So here, again, another confusion of color, another confusion of light source, environment. I'm not sure I can go through all of these, but which one do you want? And that's the one you have to stick with, alright? You have to choose one and stick to it. You can't have green and pink counteract. I know it's an alien environment, but green and pink, big no-no. You have to choose one and stick to it. Light behaves the same throughout the universe. If we found a planet in an alien world, they're still going to have the same physics and the same rules of gravity and the same anything in the same atomic structures as we have them here. Unless we go to a different alien landscape in a different dimension, which has different kinds of compositions for its atoms and different, just a very different kind of building block for their universe than what we have, which is the atom, which has very specific physics to it. So yes, the light environment will reflect all the objects here. Nothing will be secure in its color. Nothing gets to just be its own color and be left alone. You choose a color, and that's the color you stick to. Blue is generally the nicest color to use for a light environment because it's blue outside. We have blue days, we have blue nights. So it's nice when we have that, a mixture of blue in there somewhere. We start with the blue and we work up. Then we throw that rocky color on. I think this blue is a little green. So something like that, which is the best next color to use if you're working with grayscales that are really dark. And then after that, we just start to decide, okay, what's the color of these? It's a pale white, and how does that pale white affect the color of the ground? So if the ground is like a rocky, earthy color, how do we get that yellow to come through the blue? It doesn't. Yellow and blue counteract each other. What's left after the yellow and blue? So the yellow of the ground and the blue of the sky and that white of the sunlight, all we're left with is that reddish kind of like soil color, like that pale pinkish soil color. And that's these two colors match. That's the color I'm going to throw over all of the terrain here. Of course, I have to delete where I'm going to have a cast shadow. So all of this area here is cast shadow, cast shadow, cast shadow, cast shadow, cast shadow, and then duplicate the layer, saturate it. Whoa, saturate it just a little more. And change its color. So this is a good color to use. And then I'm going to get a cooler color for the shadows here. So wherever, this is the color of the environment on the object. So I'm going to move upward towards the cools and get a color that's vibrant in this level of value. And again, just throw that over and restrict the light environment of the shadow to mix with the light environment or color or atmospheric color of anything that the light is touching. So this whole area is in shadow and this area here is in light. And so the values need to reflect that. Your values weren't contrasted enough. The line of sight is moving this way. The more you organize your fundamentals, the more you're going to be, have a successful painting. So raise that value up. That light source is causing that illumination. And this object here, so there's the contrast that we just fixed, and the colors as well. And then there's this, actually I haven't fixed the contrast just yet. The light sources need to be bright. They need to be this color. And the light source itself, if it's going to be blue, if it's going to be like a bluish sky, then we need to throw that blue over everything that the light touches. So over here, that like vibrant blue. If the light source is going to be blue, so I'm going to change it in a sec. If the light source is going to be warm, like a warmer, sandy, kind of through the sand kind of look, then everything should be warm as well. So white is warmer. White can also be cool. And I'm going to just erase away that white near the edges of everything. Merge down, saturate the whole thing, find it more comfortable, move back down. So now we're kind of unifying the values. Everything is kind of being unified together. Throw that white. Actually, just throw that like that. It's so hard to decide exactly which one to do with while still preserving what you did, to make sure that I'm not kind of like offending your choices. Okay. So because this is the focal point, I'm going to throw in some more detail over here. That ear also casts a shadow. Normal. Just like that. Come on. And now that we've kind of just taken care of that, this object is taking up a lot of space in the environment, and I don't know what this object is compared to all the detail here and the fact that it's on the line of sight. This object, what is it? What is it? It can't just be a basic rock. Compared to this deserves to be in the background somewhere. Over here, what we need to do is just probably complete this arc. Okay, so completing that arc just like that. Get rid of that shape, put some more heads, pieces of other body types. This character here is just discovering this, and this object is nearly the same size as the focal point. The focal point does not share anything with the rest of the painting. Write that back to me. So this object is not a focal point, is really less in the radiation. So let's look at the radiation map. 100% opacity. Alright, this checks out. This doesn't check out. This doesn't check out. This checks out. This checks out. So the fact that you put this kind of low detail object on somewhere that belongs over here with the same kind of brushstroke density as something that is out here, it's wrong. It's also not an interesting silhouette. If we just looked at this object, just as a silhouette, white against the background, what is that object? If we look at it just as in its silhouette state, what is it? I can't make out what it is. Is it a rock? If the silhouette reads really cool, over here as a cool rock structure, then yeah, this is a pretty cool thing to include in the landscape. So this is why we do thumbnails, so that we can see whether or not the silhouette reads. You can make it even cooler. You can just go, oh, no. You can even make that sound if you need to. Just give it that crazy shit, go nuts. Just make it interesting in its silhouette, which is why you can't skip the thumbnail part of the environment painting. The read happens there. If you're pitching this to an art director, do you want to render it and then pitch it to him, or do you want to just do a quick read, a quick test of the read, and then pitch it to the art director, him or her? Sorry, Tumblr. Alright? You can make it even cooler. You can make it like, it's barely hanging. And that would be a cooler shape. I don't know what the fuck I just drew, but that would be cooler, than just a basic shape like that. Alright? So balance your colors. Figure out your light environment colors. Reassess your line of sight and the focal point radiation, and I think you're on your way to having a better read for your illustration. But just at these changes, I wonder what the difference is. Yeah, much, I guess a better read all around, but it feels very Alfonso Mucho, like a very deliberate color choice that just don't match and they're on purpose. Which I guess is okay for a light environment, but it needs to be a little bit more familiar. At least get the silhouette down and then choose the colors. If it still doesn't have a good read here, then you need to work on it. Okay. Yes. So let's. The focal point should share the same theme with the rest of the painting. Well, that's we're talking theme. I'm talking technicals and form. The focal point shouldn't share anything. It shouldn't share the same values. It shouldn't share the same focal point. Detail value. It shouldn't share the same focus, same size of the brush. It shouldn't share the same saturation. It shouldn't share the same tension. So the central, like the position in the canvas. It shouldn't share anything with the rest of the painting, technically speaking. So you've got super awesome detail over here. The colors are great. The colors are just wonderful. You have the right kinds of greens, very blue. You have the right kind of sunlight. The fact that you added the brightest point over here, but the two sister stars are setting over there, doesn't make sense at all. They need to be over. You've used some texture overlays, which are really good. But please make sure that when you add the sunlight, that if the rays are going this direction, then the sun would have been over here. And if those were minor stars, they would not be visible through the clouds. It's a very thick layer of clouds. So this here is too dark. This isn't as distant as it seems. This is too large to be not dark, that faded. needs to be a little closer. So this just generally needs to be, just to have a lot more contrast to it. I don't know if I can pull it off. Oops, wrong layer. Okay, desaturate. It needs to be just a little closer. The point of radiation is confused. We have different degrees of cluster and detail over here, here. These are way too detailed. Over here. The line of sight seems to be confused. It should be something like very, very consistent. It should be like a consistent line of sight. But there's so many left, I'm going to have to look at them on Tuesday. I'm starting to lose my voice or feel a little weak in the head, but I'll be looking at the rest of these again. If you want to make corrections according to what you saw today for your submissions and resubmit, please feel free to do that. Also, this painting here needs to be a little bit more populated with more of the units from the description, so pieces of stuff. I need to see more pieces of stuff. If I was a movie maker and I'm trying to show off this final scene or this initial establishing shot in the painting in the movie, I need to see a little bit more. I need to show a little bit more of what's happening. And having this lack of focus in the detail scope and the radiation of the detail, this random character that isn't a complete silhouette even though there's enough light to illuminate him. I'm not sure exactly what kind of landscape it is, so you need to be a little bit more deliberate with your choices and dress up the canvas a little bit more. It's a low camera, lots of sky, so you can throw in a little bit more detail on the sky and less detail on the edges of the canvas, which is a very big mistake. Thanks everyone for watching. The next critique days are going to be on the 11th and the 16th, and the next environment is officially announced. It's going to be the Witch's Hovel. I'll upload all the information you need. Thank you everyone for watching today. I hope today's class was helpful. Have a great day. Bye-bye.